Good evening and welcome to another exciting program. Now tonight I was going to talk about the magical qualities of hair, or my lack of it rather. But if you don't mind, I'll put that off to another program because something more pressing has come along. And tonight we're going to talk about Comrade Nigel. I think you know who I'm talking about. Mr. Farage. And first of all, I'll get the dirty joke out of the way because now this might upset American Indians. So if you got Chief running trots in for a cup of tea, tell him to sod off, won't you? Again, if the vicar's in, although they might have heard it actually, pets, put them outside, and of course, put your children into another room. And I'll get the dirty joke out of the way first of all, and then we can start talking about Comrade Nigel, because something more pressing has come along since I did a show with Caroline Stevens last Friday. Please see that program. Sorry, that show, because it's one of their best, I think. So anyway, here's the dirty joke first of all. American Air Force Base somewhere in Great Britain wanted to commemorate the Custer's last stand, you see, and they thought, well, what's the best way of commemorating it? You know, it's a bit of American history here. So they decided to get one of these lefty weirdo type sculptors in to make a beautiful sculpture to commemorate Custer's last stand, you see. So anyway, the day arrives and there's all the American generals standing there and saluting, and you know, sorry, they do it with the right hand, don't they? And you know, there's aircraft flying over, and there's all the old, you know, bands playing, and suddenly there's this sort of there's this sculpture sitting there with a cover over it, and then they pull this sculpture off, this cover off rather, and it's like, oh, look at this sculpture to commemorate Custer's last stand, you see. And there's at the bottom of the sculpture is all these fish, and then there's like a kind of biblical type motifs over the top of the fish, and then there's Indians, American Indians, having sex in all different positions. Generals say, quick, cover that up. What the hell's this? And they look round at the sculpture and say, Custer's last stand? Is this an insult? What's going on? And the sculptor says, oh no. He says, this is to commemorate his last words. What? He says, holy mackerel, effing Indians. Anyway, on with the show. So as I say, you can invite the vicar back in now, so it's quite clean. Now, I'd like some feedback from you on how many times you've heard about Nigel Farage in the last couple of days, because there's something weird going on. This morning, sadly, I know it's a bit sad, I tuned into BBC local radio, and second point, after the news, they were talking about the lockdown and this, that and the other. And who should come on? A representative from his new political party. And he was allowed to speak in full. And I thought, funny, how comes? Because my view is, if you get onto the BBC and you start talking on there, the words in red flashing lights come into my brain saying, fake, 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 fraud, fraud, fraud. They're pushing an illusion. And as I said, both Caroline and I said on the last Friday's show, it's all an illusion. And the people in the political sphere are illusionists, as I see it. So what are they trying to push? And I think this is reinforcing, my theory that we're going through and I know I'm going to bore the hell out of you, but the 4 stages of ideological subversion. And you're saying, oh, he's not on about that again, is he? So I'll be brief. Stage 1, demoralisation, wearing a obedience muzzle, standing away from people. That's stage 1. So that's demoralize. So you're demoralizing people. I'm not fit to be near you. You could be contaminated with something nasty. Stage 2, destabilisation. So you've got demoralisation, destabilisation. That is, the economy goes to the pan. Bang, that's it. So that's it. Stage 3, I planned social unrest. And that has been planned for a long time. And it's a controlled social unrest. And from this social unrest, where there's chaos, absolute nothing but chaos, nothing's working, nothing's going right, comes this phoenix from the ashes, who's a leader who tells people what they want to hear. And I could be wrong, but I think that leader is waiting in the wings. Can you guess who I think it might be? And that leader will lead us away from the old political system to this new one. And once they get into power, boy, aren't we in for a surprise? Because, as I've said before, that will be stage 4. So you've got, remember, demoralisation, destabilisation, which we are at the moment. We're in stage 2. The shall we say, I won't mention the word, is not the crisis. The crisis is yet to come. The crisis, stage 3, which will be social upheaval, and then stage 4, the new normalisation, which will be the new political policy, new political stage, which will make Stalin and Mao look like a walk in the park. So I think that we're the illusionists, well, behind the scenes, secret services and people like that, they're now buttering us up for stage 3 and stage 4. So how comes naughty Nigel's jolly friends are allowed on the radio at peak listening time at it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and allowed to have their say without being cut off or anything like that? Do you smell something? Because I do. It's pretty strong. And first of all, we're going to chat because I've got something else that, now, as I say, I might be wrong, but naughty Nigel, as I call him, he might be a very straight person and you might be okay. I hope I am wrong, but I don't know. I've got my suspicions, but it's nothing personal. I'm talking about on the political level. I'm sure personally he's probably a very nice bloke, but on the political level. Right, so what we got here? Hello, Stewie. Hasn't Nigel been to the word? Oh, I think that's yet to come. Yeah, he's going to have his dolly on his head. Oh yes, I think we got that to come. Because he's got to go there, isn't he? HQ. Whoops. Hello, Emma. Popping in for a few moments. Very bust evening. Oh, very busy evening, I suppose. Oh, well, thank you for joining us. That's very nice. And popping in to say hi, but busy evening, can't stay long. All right, I need a note from your parents. Right. So, the Daily Mail today, I think it was, wrote the following. Now, excuse me, I've got to go to my notes. And it says, Nigel Farage, cyclists need to stop being so pious. Pay road tax and obey the rules like us motorists. Well, I won't bore the hell out of you by what he's written, but what he's saying is that cyclists should pay a tax, a road tax. Well, hang on a moment. Let's think this through. Now, I've done some research this afternoon, and not even North Korea, as far as I know, has a cycle road tax. So what's he on about? And apparently it'd be more expensive to implement, and it'll cost more to implement than get the revenue in. Well, we've now got 5G in the pipeline, and we've got modern smartphones and apps, so perhaps not. And what he says in his article, and I won't read it out because it goes on for ages, is he's all against these nasty cyclists that clog up the roads and they should pay a tax, blah, blah, blah. And what it really turns out is that cyclists are really nasty people. Well, I happen to be a motorist and also a cyclist. And where I live, I sometimes cycle to the local town, which is about 4 miles away. I very rarely see another cyclist. Admittedly, it's pretty semi-rural where I live. But when I get to my local town, there's generally, you could count the amount of push bikes there on the fingers of one hand. I mean, there's cycle racks and it's spot for choice where to park your bike. And I always cycle with the view of a motorist. So I do not hold up traffic. Most of the time I'm off the road. And when I say off the road, there's cycle tracks that go through woods and things like that. And again, I never, very, very rarely do I pass another cyclist. And if you do, it's such a rare occasion, we sort of nod to each other and say good afternoon or good morning. That's how rare it is. There's not that many bikes on the road. I suppose it's different in London and other places, but where I live, there's not that many bikes around, push bikes. But what he's actually saying, I mean, that's not new. They were talking. I remember my father talking about that. They was thinking about it in the late 1940s, early 50s. I had a long time before I was born, and they can't really tax bikes that easily. But I think that is the thin end of the wedge. Nowadays they probably could, because it's this social credit system. So you think about it. You're on your bike. There's more revenue to be had. You know, you sort of stop over a white line, or I don't know, get off your bike on a double yellow line and bang, you've been fined £20, and bang, you've been fined £100 there. So I think that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect is, in communism, you've always got to have a minority group that you're either against or you're trying to stick up for. And that is the way the communist system works. So, you know, and you don't think Naughty Nigel's communist? Think again. I think most of them went through the university system that has been actually infiltrated by communism. So you don't think they are, but when you look at it another way, communism is an extension to capitalism, because really capitalism is to kick out all your opposition. So you've just got a handful of industrialists and money makers, and that's how North Korea works. There's just a handful of industrialists there and absolutely super rich dictating to a minority. It's run by, I think, about half a dozen families. All we see is the fat bloke with a funny haircut, but there's a lot behind the scenes, and they live in riches absolutely far beyond anybody else. So the other thing is that, does anybody think that elections are now fair? And this was a question that Caroline asked me to put forward, so I have. And so, you know, do you think elections are fair anymore? Because I don't. And the second thing is that Nigel booted out, allegedly, I believe, the people he didn't like, so to speak. So they could be excellent possible MPs or workers, but oh no, they're not yes people. Now, I've actually come across this not in the political field, but actually in architecture. I worked on a project once where a handful of us knew it inside out, and it was a massive project we was working on, and it was very complex, and we'd worked on it for considerable time, so you could mention any part of that project and we knew it back to front. And then suddenly some bigwig comes in because the other bloke was kicked out, the senior person, and he gets all these yes men in, and we were given the order of the boot. We were freelance, so that's life. But we actually had to hand it over to people that did not have a clue. But it's the pyramid structure, and there's all yes sir, no sir, yes sir, no sir. And he didn't want freelance blokes who are a little bit, can get a bit stroppy if you rub them up the wrong way around. He wanted permanent staff who he knew. And I heard afterwards that the project I was working on went, excuse my language, tits up. So serves him right. And that's it. Now let's have a look in chat again, and the next section that I'm going to talk about is how governments have screwed us historically. And if you think that the government is there for you, I'm going to mention two things where people have been screwed over. Okay. Now, first of all, let's have a look in chat again. We've got Cat. Bet they have all been there. Part of the job spec. Yeah. And we've got Emma. I've been reading about the War of the Roses. Makes today seem less horrible. Well, this takes me on to the next stage. Okay. Now, Caroline and I last Friday were talking about the illusion. It's all an illusion. And the late, great John Harris, I did a program with him before he passed away. Well, unfortunately, they said he committed suicide. I don't believe he did. But he said it's all an illusion. He was spot on. It is an illusion. I've got war. That's an illusion, as I've said many times before. World War I started 20 years before it was officially announced, because they had to build the people up to a point where by 1914 the mass populace was chomping at the bit to go and kill Germans. And we've got, hello, what we got here? We got something from Paul. Hello, Paul Craven. All political parties belong to the City of London. Spot on. Every parliament has a remembrancer, the representative for the city. Yes, I do believe now. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Queen has to ask permission before she goes into the City of London. That's what I heard. Now, I haven't researched it. I agree that. So if I'm wrong, please tell me. But I think it is right, because the person told me who'd done their research. But I don't like to say things unless it's been fully researched. But I'm going back a little bit in history now. Now, there's some records that were released in 2017 that have been held under lock and key for 100 years. I'm going to delve into that, and you'll see the similarity to what's happening today. Okay. Now, has anybody ever heard of Mata Hari? Now, if you go back a couple of generations to the First World War generation, you mentioned Mata Hari. I would imagine that most would have said she was a spy, a German spy who killed, whose actions led to the deaths of thousands. Okay. Now, she was shot, I would say murdered, in 1917. And I've been looking into Mata Hari, and her real name was Margaret. Now, I can't speak Dutch, but she was Dutch, and she was born on 7th of August 1876, and she was shot on the 15th of October 1917, and her name was Margaretha Gertrude MacLeod. That's sort of more of an English surname, and she was born in the Netherlands. And she was, shall we say, the type of lady who was, well, we call her the corner shop, open all hours, shall we say. And those of you of a certain age would know her as a martini girl, because there used to be an advert for martini where there used to be a girl, and she'd say anytime, any place, anywhere. And I think that would explain her. She, putting it bluntly, she was a very, very high class prostitute. She was very, very attractive, and she married a chap, and she put it about a bit, you know, and she the French Secret Service is a long story, so please go into Wikipedia or somewhere like that, although Wikipedia isn't always that accurate, and look it up. But putting it in a nutshell, she was screwed over by, possibly, I don't know whether physically, but shall we say metaphorically, by the British Secret Service and the French Secret Service. She volunteered to, because she could speak several languages fluently. She's a very educated woman, and she volunteered for the French Secret Services to seduce a German senior ranking officer so that she could actually send back information to the British and the French Secret Service. And she did just that. I'm not sure what country it was now. I think it was Portugal, but I could be wrong. And she didn't get a response. Strange. And then, as I say, I'm just putting it into a nutshell. When she got to, she actually went to Folkestone, and then she went to France, and she was arrested. And what had happened in 1917, the French had experienced phenomenal losses on the front, to a point where it was just a complete bloodbath. It was a massacre. And the French were ordered over the top, and they're just being mowed down by machine guns. We all realise that. And a lot of the French regiments refused to go to the front and made bleating noises like sheep as they passed the senior ranks. They got a bit of go in them, but the British are so go to the front, yes sir, straight away. Well, anyway, she was the scapegoat, and they said that 50,000 men had been killed due to her spying, this, that, and the other. And the poor girl was shot in October 1917. But the entire file of what actually happened was kept under lock and key until 2017, when the French army opened it for public scrutiny. And it turns out she was framed. There is not a shred of evidence that she spied for the Germans, and she was used as a scapegoat so that the French, and to the British to a certain extent, could blame the huge losses of the First World War on her. But I admire her. I mean, there's been no official pardon or anything like that, but they said, the reports said, that when she went in front of the firing squad, she blew a kiss to firing squad, and she dressed in her finest, and she refused to have a blindfold, and she died with her head upwards. I must say, dignity. So Mara Hardy, can't pronounce her name, Mara Hari, I'll blow you a kiss, because to me, she's my heroine. Poor girl went to the firing squad and she was innocent. So let's have a look in chat again. Let's see what we've got here. Now, I already read this one out. Represented the city. Stewie, I have you really? Tell folk about Edith Cavell. I haven't done my research on her. Sorry, Stewie. I know the name. Edith Cavell. Yeah, I'll have to do my research. Sorry, but that's probably for a later program. But directly I'll switch off. I'll have a look at Edith Cavell. Thanks, Stewie. But sorry, I can't do that today because I know the name, but I don't know too much about her. And we've got one here from Dunblane has a 100-year Secrecy Act on parts of the inquiry. The 100-year Act is to protect the establishment from any harm. Spot on. Why should there be a cover-up? And Dr. David Kelly as well. There's a 100-year one on that. But I mean, that poor woman, Mata Hari, that's not a real name, it's a stage name. All these years, and you think all those veterans who thought you to spit on and think, she was spying, not a shred of evidence. She was framed. No wonder they kept it under lock and key for 100 years. I mean, it's sad. You think her family and all that, what they went through, and the poor girl was innocent. you know, and that's a very, very sad story. But she's a very, very brave lady, incredibly brave. And now we go to the Second World War. Now, when I was a kid at school, we used to have people come round schools from industry. You probably remember it. We used to have Brook Bonds. Used to be a bloke, old boy with a white coat. And he always had a film, and the projector always broke down. You know, I never seen film loads of times about locusts in Africa, flying locusts, and the film itself was so bloody old. It's a wonder it went. And again, the most exciting part was when the projector broke down, and I don't remember the other films, but they must have had other. And was it Amiga watches used to come round. Dunlop was another one. Now, I must be in infant school, very, very young, and Dunlop left booklets to the children they could have free of charge. Very nice. And a couple of years ago, I was having a sort out, and I came across this booklet, and it was very, very interesting. Now, before D-Day, 6th of June 1944, and this was known soon after the war, the Allies decided to create an illusion. And they wanted the Germans to think that the Allies were going to land in go across the shortest route of the channel. And that is, they wanted Mr. H, or the Germans, to believe that we were going to land at Calais. And they did this amazing bluff. First of all, there was The Man That Never Was, and there was a film made about it in the 1950s. And what it was is that they got a corpse, and they dressed it up in a senior ranks uniform, and they put fake maps in this chap's briefcase, and they also had fake theatre tickets. So this chap was a so-called high-ranking officer, and they put maps on the proposed invasion of Calais, and they put this corpse into a submarine, fired it out of the torpedo tube so it would wash up on the shores of Portugal, knowing full well the Portuguese authorities would give the information to the German embassy in Portugal. And it worked. They did. And another thing they did, and this is where Dunlop came in, Dunlop made loads and loads of inflatable tanks, which they put out in loads and loads of fields in East Anglia. And they deliberately let German reconnaissance planes photograph these lines and lines of tanks. And they had about half a dozen blokes who would put a flag up, and they had loads of fake tents as well, loads of tents everywhere. They'd have half a dozen blokes that went out at night and pulled a flag down, then put a flag up during the day, and they actually had little rollers where they flattened the grass to make it look as if these inflatable tanks were real. So you could see the tank tracks. And again, they let German reconnaissance planes fly over and didn't put up much, shall we say, resistance to it. And the bluff worked, because the Germans didn't think, although Rommel did, that the Allies would go one of the longest routes, which was to Normandy. They thought it would be to Calais, and Hitler got all these documents and reconnaissance photographs, no end. He's like, oh yes, I definitely. Sorry, I can't take off Hitler very well, but he probably said, oh yes, they are coming to Calais. And let's face it, if you or I were a military tactician in the German army, we would have probably believed the same, because you know a corpse has been washed up on the Portuguese shore with all the maps on it. There's massive build-up of equipment in East Anglia. No, it wasn't, because the massive build-up was in the New Forests. That's where my father went before D-Day, because the leaves covered all the tracks. Quite clever, really, when you think about it. But that was an absolute bluff. And you think of all the other bluffs that have been. I've just mentioned two bluffs. So a poor lady got killed for the sake of an illusion, and you think D-Day was fought on the back of an illusion. that worked. So those two illusions. So governments are very, very clever at illusions of manipulating public opinion the way they want it to go. And I think public opinion is being manipulated the way they want it to go. And what I'll be very interested in as feedback from you is, number one, do you think elections are fairly fought? Now, regarding Trump and Biden, well, as we covered that last Friday, I think they're probably two cheeks of the same arse. Personally, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Trump, because it seems that the people that finance Trump, one of the people, as Caroline said, goes to the Bilderberg meetings, and that's financially maybe financing Uncle Nigel. Who knows? Probably is. Probably Caroline is now probably shouting at her computer monitor now saying, Chris, why do you mention this? Why do you mention? Sorry, Caroline. You can come on later and say it yourself, all right? Bit of blackmail there, Caroline, if you're watching. But anyway, this is two areas. So I'll be interested in feedback on that. And also, do you think that elections are fairly fought? Because I know from personal experience, for example, although I was young at the time, when Margaret Thatcher was elected in May 1979, soon after, newspapers, little, not headlines, had columns saying that there's been election fraud. And apparently what was happening in old people's homes, managers were getting postal votes and voting Conservative for the elderly people. But as far as I remember, there was no charges brought, and those managers weren't sent to court. So I think election fraud is rife. So it's a short program tonight. So let's have a look in chat. Not surprised, history is full of such stories. Yeah. And that's The Man That Never Was. Great film. Never knew the story behind it. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, there was a documentary about it. Apparently, The Man That Never Was, he was, I think he was a drunkard and a dropout. And this fella, he died in some sort of hostel. And he didn't have much of a family or anything like that. But he fitted, he had the structure, shall we say, the physique of a general, and he fitted it perfectly. And because I think he drowned, something like that, because the Allies knew that this body had to be authentic and make it look as if he'd actually drowned, and his lungs were full of water, so it was very, very authentic. But there's also another film called I Was Monty's Double, in which Montgomery had a double that when he was planning D-Day, this double went to Italy and Sicily, etc. And now we go over to Paul. Hello, Paul. Government is selected. Yes, the election is the illusion that makes you believe you have a voice. Yeah, that's why I don't vote. Because it's not a democracy. It cannot be a democracy whilst we've got usury. Because let's face it, any politician that mentions the abolition of usury, that'll either be the end of their life or the end of their political career. Let's look at the people that abolished usury. Number one, Abraham Lincoln. He introduced the greenback during the American Civil War because the North couldn't afford the war. And they introduced debt-free currency. And we all know what happened to Abraham Lincoln. He was shot by John Wilkes Booth, who was Sherry Booth's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And Sherry Booth, of course, is married to Tony Blair. And coming forward, another man who will remain nameless, shall we say, but made an appearance in 1933, also abolished usury, booted out all the banksters, and had a local currency and an international currency. He introduced the Reichsmark, and they still had the Deutschmark, and the country went from bust to boom overnight. There's a bit of a myth that Kennedy try to introduce debt-free currency. I used to believe that, but if you look at the Corbett report, where he is interviewed by G. Edward Griffin, he has got the evidence that no, he didn't quite introduce debt-free currency, and it was more of the mob that shot him, got rid of him. Anyway, that's enough for tonight. And sorry about the dirty gag at the beginning. It was a bit, And what we got here? Hang on. We got elections are probably just vaudeville. Yeah, they are. They are. It's the Punch and Judy show, as I said when I was the last show. Unelected usury scammers rule countries. Unelected civil servants run countries. And the politicians and governments are the Punch and Judy show to take the populace attention away. Remember, it's the Illusionist Act, away from the first two facts. And that's it. In really, that's it. There's no more to really be said about that, Oh, hello, Magic J. So I'll just wrap up tonight's program and join me again next Monday. Please subscribe and ring the bell. And please share this if you're on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, And thank you very much for joining me tonight. Sorry, it's a very short show. And hopefully I'll get around to the magic qualities of hair. And that is a very interesting subject. And I was going to call it Keep Your Hair On. But it's something I've been researching into. And it seems that society is more creative the longer men's hair becomes. So that's something to be looking into. So thanks for joining me this evening, and join me again next Monday and possibly on Friday with a mystery guest. So thank you again and have a good week. See you next week. Bye.